Hello students, welcome to the EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. M.N. Gupta, Emeritus Professor at IIT Delhi. Today we are going to talk on module epitopes, antigenicity and haptens. This again is from the paper on immunology. As we have learned so far, immunology is about how our bodies deal with non-self substances. It should be made clear at this stage that many toxic or even drugs may be non-self, but the immune system does not respond to these. Other mechanisms which are called detoxification mechanisms, those mechanisms take care of such substances. So, the objectives of this module are to learn how antigens or infectious agents invade our bodies. Also to know the three ways in which our epithelia protects us. We'll also learn or try to understand that what are the features of a good antigen. In the process, we will also learn about what are epitopes and haptens. So the concept which we will cover is that we will see how the infectious agents invade us through either the mucosal surfaces or through the external epithelia. We will also learn about what is called the antigenicity of these antigens and their antigenic determinants. These antigenic determinants are also many times referred to as epitopes. Infectious agents are among the most important antigens with which we are concerned. These infectious agents are either airborne, they can be waterborne, or they invade our systems through food and personal contact. An insect bite or a wound damages our skin. That also is a route for the entry of the infectious agent and makes the infection possible. Before we understand how our immune system treats these as antigens, let us first of all try to understand what constitutes a good antigen. There are physical barriers to the entry of pathogen. The mucosal tissues of the human body are shown in this figure. Infectious diseases occur when an invading microorganism enters through one of these mucosal surfaces or external epithelia. These mucosal surfaces are present in airways, gastrointestinal tract and reproductive tract. The external epithelia can be crossed by antigens, as in the case of wounds and insect bites, where the integrity of the external epithelia is disturbed. Some of the outward manifestations of such a thing happening are blood clot, formation of a scab, granulation tissue, or formation of a scar. Some infections are purely local in nature. An example of such a local infection is athlete's foot and sebaceous cyst. In cases when the infection cannot be controlled locally, it spreads to other parts of the body. This spread of the pathogen takes place by blood circulation, lymphatics, and also by toxin release by some microbes. Spread of airborne infections are most difficult to control. Waterborne or foodborne infectious agents can be avoided by preventing the intake of contaminated food or water. Physical contacts are necessary for urinogenital tract invasion. The infection occurs either by just colonization or by crossing the internal epithelium. For colonizing pathogens, the binding to the internal epithelia has to be firm enough so that the pathogens are not dislodged by flow of air or fluids. The internal epithelia are called mucosal epithelia, as these secrete mucus containing mucin glycoproteins. The function of this mucus is to prevent adherence of the pathogen. In the respiratory tract, mucus flows through beating of the epithelial cilia. Thus, some lung infections can be caused if there is a defect in the mucus secretion or these ciliary movements in some people. This kind of constitutes a mechanical barrier for infection. Similarly, peristalsis in the gut ensures not only movement of food particles but of the pathogens as well. Bacterial overgrowth in the intestinal lumen may result from the defective peristalsis. The peristalsis is shown in detail in this figure. There are more barriers for infection. The nature of the chemical barriers, for example, is different at different places in the body. The sweat contains fatty acids which lower its pH. Lysozyme also aids the antimicrobial action of sweat. Lysozyme is also present in saliva and tears. Pepsin in the gut is also a hydrolase, a protease. The low pH of the stomach also prevents microbial growth. Some of these barriers are indicated in this figure and in the various places like ear, eyes, mouth cavity, nasal cavity, trachea and bronchi, skin, urethra, stomach, vagina, and anus. The small intestine has Paneth cells in the base of the crypts beneath the epithelial stem cells. These cells produce antimicrobial peptides, which we have referred to, specifically alpha defensins or cryptidines. These are both antimicrobial and antifungal actually. Related peptides, beta defensins, are produced by the skin and respiratory tracts. Two surfactant proteins A and D bath the lung epithelial surface and opsonize the pathogens. This, of course, paves the way for their phagocytosis. So, antibodies are not the only protein opsonins. Surfactant property enables these proteins to bind to microbes with different cell surface properties. Microflora in the gut also as an important part of the immunity. This is called the microbiological barrier. Apart from competing with the pathogen for the nutrient, such flora also produce antimicrobial substances like colicins, which are the peptides produced by the E. coli present in this normal microbial flora. The use of broad spectrum antibiotics destroys the intestinal flora. Hence, its recolonization is important. Hence, the importance of the prebiotics and probiotics in maintaining or re-establishing the intestinal flora. The slide here shows that so many different species are present in the intestinal microflora. Their location in the duodenum, jejunum, ileum, and colon with appendix is also shown. Interestingly, gut flora is being recognized as having a very important role in the health of an individual. Let us look at the features of a good antigen. For the antigen, the size matters. Bigger, the better. Larger is better as far as size or the molecular weight of the known cell substance is concerned. High molecular weight proteins are good antigens as compared to smaller peptide hormones. Serum albumins have molecular weights around 60,000 Dalton and are good antigens. However, these are known to produce tolerance. We will shortly discuss how one can still get specific antibodies against small molecular weight substances. Large molecules with repetitive structures like polysaccharides, homo alpha amino acid polymers, and even nucleic acids are poor antigens. Proteins with diverse side chains are good antigens. Good antigens have optimum flexibility. The flexibility should be enough to bind to the cell receptors, but highly flexible structures become unstable. Unstable molecules are not good antigens. A related parameter is degradability. If the antigen is hydrolyzed fast, it does not last long enough to produce immune response. Again, there is a range of optimum vulnerability as antigens. As we will learn later, antigens have to be processed, which requires a protein, for example, as an antigen to be broken down to the peptides. Inert organic polymers, homo or copolymers of D-alpha amino acids, thus are poor antigens because they are not amenable to this process or this phenomena called antigen processing. Bacterial lipopolysaccharides are good antigens. Slide 20. Let us introduce the concept of epitopes now. So an antigen essentially is a large complex molecule, and in fact it will provoke formation of many antibodies. The areas on its surface on which different antibodies bind are called epitopes or antigenic determinants. All exposed residues on a protein surface are not epitopes. Further work has revealed that epitopes could be sequence based, such as peptide segment of a protein can constitute an epitope. They also could be conformation based, where the distant peptide segments have come together to form a particular conformation. Alvin Cabot has been a well-known immunologist who contributed quite a lot to our understanding of the importance of the structural aspects of the antibody antigen interactions. Alvin Cabot made antibodies to dextran. Dextran is a polysaccharide consisting of glucose. The oligosaccharides of glucose of different length were used to inhibit antigen antibody binding. What Alvin Cabot found was that a tetrasaccharide was a good inhibitor, but hexasaccharide was the best inhibitor. Beyond the hexasaccharide length, that means the higher oligomers, did not improve the inhibition. This elegant experiment gave an insight into the size of the binding site of the antibody. Conversely, it also revealed the size of an epitope. Other experiments indicate that in the case of the proteins, pentapeptide is the size of a single epitope. So what comes about is that an antigen has many epitopes and generates many antibodies with different specificities, each corresponding to a particular epitope. Epitopes bind to both B cells and T cells and trigger the response of these lymphocytes in a specific fashion. The interaction of these epitopes in the case of the B lymphocytes via their B cell receptor and with the T lymphocytes via T cell receptor is shown in this figure. So, when an infectious agent invades us as an antigen, it generates many antibodies in the blood. Each of these different antibodies are directed towards each epitope on the antigen. So, how did we learn about the specific nature of the antibodies? Early information came from the pioneering work of a scientist whom we had referred in our introductory module. His name was Carl Landsteiner. Painstakingly, he raised anti-sera against many heptanes or antigens and then examined their cross reactivity. That is, he examined that if he raises antibody against a particular heptane or antigen, does it also happen to react with some other heptane or antigen. These studies actually led Landsteiner to discover the ABO blood group system. That system is essentially based upon the antibody specificity against the blood cell surface antigens, which are either A or B or both of them. We mentioned that one requires a minimum size for a molecule to become antigenic. We also had indicated at that time that there is a way by which the antibodies against a small molecule can be created. To explain that, it is necessary to introduce the concept of heptane. A small molecule is not an immunogen. However, if it is linked to a larger carrier, which itself is an antigenic molecule, then the conjugate can be used for immunization. This immunization will produce antibodies not only against epitopes on the carrier, but directed against the small molecule as well. In such cases and in this context, the small molecule is called heptane. It is derived from the Greek word heptene, which means fasten. The concept of the heptane works because once the small molecule is bound to the carrier, the immune system looks at the whole conjugate as one large antigenic structure. For example, when a heptane DNP is injected into an animal, no antibodies will be formed because DNP, being dinitrophenol, that is a very small molecule. It does not lead to provoking of the immune system. However, BSA can be injected. It's a good antigen, as we mentioned, and the animal will produce anti-BSA antibodies. BSA can be used as a carrier. It's a good carrier for conjugating heptanes. So if we create a conjugate of the DNP with BSA by covalently linking dinitrophenol to BSA, then this conjugate actually also works as a good antigen, and it gives rise to anti-DNP as a major part of the antibody, anti-BSA, which is a minor part of the antibody, and anti-DNP BSA. That means the antibodies which bind to the portion which is the place around where the conjugation has taken place and consists of both DNP and BSA. Structural motif is also a minor part of the component. We had referred to the extensive studies by Karl Landsteiner. In fact, much of our understanding about the specificity of the antigen antibody interactions comes from studies by Karl Landsteiner, who used many heptanes to produce antibodies. A remarkable finding was that the antibodies can be highly specific and they could distinguish between ortho, para, and meta derivatives of aminobenzene sulfonates, or even between glucose and galactose. To be able to distinguish between such similar molecules shows that the antibodies in many cases can be almost as specific as enzymes. Glucose and galactose are both monosaccharides. They differ very little structurally. In the case of the nitrobenzene sulfonates, what basically we are seeing is Particularly when we talk of the meta-nitrobenzene sulfonate or orthoaminobenzene sulfonate, the difference is only in the position of the sulfonate and nitro group on the benzene ring. This is a very high level of specificity as far as molecular recognition of the antibodies is concerned. Nevertheless, antibodies can cross-react, and this was also discovered by Karl Landsteiner. He used many small molecular weight substances as heptanes and found that many antibodies show cross-reactivity against the different heptanes. So he gradually understood how discriminatory immune systems can be at times and how sometimes the cross-reactivity does happen between some type of molecules. The cross reactions, as are shown, it's because of the shared epitope or similar epitope kind of a situation. Cross reactivity can consist of actually two kinds. It can be the ability of an individual antibody combining site to react with more than one antigenic determinant. It could also be the ability of a population of antibody molecules to react with more than one antigen. The cross reactivity today can be looked at by various techniques. In the times of the Landsteiner and for quite some time thereafter, the precipitate of the antibody with the antigen forming in the agar plates was the only means. Even today, this simple technique is usefully employed. We will look at this technique and the various other techniques in a later module. So, students, let us now summarize what we have learnt in today's module. First of all, we learnt that our skin protects us. Our nose and eyes are also protected. Sweat, hair, tears all have protective action against microbes. Insect bites and wounds, we learnt, are the openings to the microbes. Contaminated air, food or drink, physical contacts between an infected person also can lead to the invasion of the three tracts in our body. We have today learnt that the microbes are good antigens. We also learnt that what constitutes a good antigen. We learnt that the good antigens have bigger size, optimum stability, and are structurally complex. However, we learnt that we can also raise antibodies against smaller molecular weight substances which are called heptanes, and this can be done by linking them to another large carrier antigen.